Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whoever you're doing it with, etc., and all that stuff. I'm just glad you're doing it here with me on this little old channel I like to call Legal Vices, where we talk about legal things and vices, and occasionally we talk about things completely off the rails. But Maritime Monday is a staple around here. It's been a little bit patchy recently, but it should be getting itself back on track. There's just so much else going on, and if you recall the origins of Maritime Monday, it was a gap filler for when I had nothing to talk about one day. So I thought, let's talk about what I do for a living. Let's review some ship collisions and see what happens there. And that's sort of how it came to be. And so today we're going to be for the second week talking about the topic I said I would never talk about, the Titanic. Yeah, there's a reason for that. And that's today we're going to be doing what I wanted to do on the 15th, the anniversary, the 112th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic was our last Maritime Monday. We're doing tonight what I wanted to do then, but I didn't get permission to do it at that point. But subsequently, I've received permission to do what I'm doing tonight. And basically turning the show over to my betters. People who know way more about this than I do. The Titanic is far and away the most researched ship sinking in the history of ship sinkings. And that just means that literally everybody else is more of an expert on the sinking of the Titanic than I am. But before we get into that, just take a couple of minutes to say hi to all of you. If you're watching on the replay, you might want to skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to see us getting acquainted and talking to the people that are here. First, I want to announce I'm sure someone's mentioned it in chat already. I haven't had a chance to look. But Bernard Hill, British actor Bernard Hill passed away today. I guess it would be yesterday, on May 5th. He was famous for not only playing Theoden in the Lord of the Rings movies, but he also played Captain Edward Smith, the captain of the Titanic, in the movie Titanic. So yeah, I think I may have killed OJ by stopping the OJ Simpson trial, and now that I've decided to cover this 2 weeks in a row, Captain Edward Smith actor Bernard Hill has passed away. So there we go. The guy had an amazing film career. He's been in a lot more cool things than that as well. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that that was the news for a Maritime Monday. The actor Bernard Hill played Captain Edward Smith in the movie Titanic has passed. All right. Somehow segueing out of that, Unhung Hero has given us our first super chat of the evening. Ceiling Dion going to make a special appearance. No Ceiling Dion today. No Ceiling Dion or Celine Dion or anybody. And by the way, very, very quickly, if you're here for the Karen Reed trial, it's a full day in court, so I won't be covering that today. I'll be doing a review tomorrow, but tomorrow is supposed to be a short day. Tuesdays and Thursdays are short days, apparently. So I will most likely be covering it live Tuesday. All right. Just checking through here. See, getting a good look at who's in chat. All right. Damn Jeff Black Widow much. What are you gonna do? I think I may have killed B. Arthur too back in the day, but that's a totally different story. All right. It looks like people in chat are just doing normal chatty things. So everybody in chat, I see you. We currently have on this day 172 people here. Wow. That's really cool. Well, stick around because we're going to learn a lot. And I say we because I'm including myself in this. We're going to be learning a lot about the Titanic in the next hour and 45 minutes or so. And then we'll go check out the Karen Reed trial somewhere else. But while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. But if you have hit the subscribe button, just double check to make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube, they mess with things. And then take our like and subscribe poll. Again, nothing special about today's like and subscribe poll. Just remember to hit the button and be subscribed. Okay? Of course. Yes, sir. And lame. Work on the polls, derp. Yeah, I just must admit, didn't have time to give it much attention because I just got back from camping and I was exhausted, and I just crashed on the bed and eventually scoured myself, all the crud off of myself in the shower, and I'm just drained. But I'm here today to do Maritime Monday as promised. Now we're gonna jump into it, and the super chats they'll come as they come, and we'll read them as they come in, because that's what we do here, assuming super chats come in. All right, today, let me again go back and tell you what we're doing today and why. Every year, on the anniversary of the Titanic sinking, a very large YouTube channel, I mean, depending, it's not like one of the mega bajillion subscriber things, but I believe they have about 340,000 subscribers now. Part-Time Explorer. We've used a couple of Part-Time Explorer videos as reference for some of the Maritime Monday shows. He does some really, really good in-depth research and things to ship accidents and maritime matters. It seems his focus is shifting much more towards things like that, which is way cool for me. But last time on the night of the Titanic anniversary, which again was April 15th, Maritime Monday, same day of the week. This ship sunk on Monday, April 15th, and we talked about it Monday, April 15th, because how do you not talk about it? I said I would never talk about it because I don't know enough about it, and there's many more people that know more about it than I do, but I thought we just had to do it on that day, because what are the odds that the same day of the week, the same day of the month, the Titanic sinking happens to coincide with Maritime Monday. So we did it, but we talked about some other facts, some facts surrounding it, and things that we don't normally talk about when we talk about the Titanic. And the reason I had to do that was because I didn't have permission from Part-Time Explorer to use their video, but I have it now. And I hope he's okay with the way I'm using the video. And I'm really excited too, because the email exchanges, they've been very, very cool. He said he's seen a couple of bits and pieces of the Maritime Monday shows and quite liked it, so he gave me permission. And he also suggested that maybe there might be a chance to do a collaboration at some point in the future. And I think doing a collab with Part-Time Explorer would be freaking awesome, because the Part-Time Explorer is an incredible channel. I love watching the videos. Very, very well researched. It's fantastic. If you haven't been to see the Part-Time Explorers channel, go there. The link to the full video of this is there now. But and not just necessarily a collaboration. I'm definitely going to invite him on as a guest, and hopefully he'll take it. That would be awesome to have him on as a guest, and a collaboration in the future would be sweet. But yeah, what they do is on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, they get together a group of people and they talk about the sinking of the Titanic. And I was very, very impressed with this last one, because they've got some cool image renderings, updated images, rendering stuff going on, and some of the elite Titanic historians on this really epic panel. And what they do is they walk through the accident and the sinking in real time and talk about what was going on at that point, who was doing what, where are they in relation to everybody else, what's going on when the iceberg appears and when they hit it. And it's really, really cool. And I wanted just to watch part of that, because it fascinates me, and I love watching it. So we're going to jump around a little bit. but we'll show a little bit at the beginning, then we'll skip a little bit. I'll explain when we get there, so I don't explain it and then show you. It's better to show than to explain. So let's dive straight into somebody's birthday. Is it been there, done that's birthday? Hey, happy birthday, brother! Cheers to you. Happy birthday. We'll be seeing you hopefully in short order. 3 weeks, and I'm in the States for vacation. Woohoo! Oh, we did Unhung Heroes super chat already. Lynn with the 10 pounds for the doggo cam. Thank you so much, Lynn. You notice you might not be able to hear the dogs snoring now because I've decided that I'm gonna keep them outside during the shows. But if we do get to dog cam, I'll open the door and they'll come running on in. So that's because I was listening to one of my streams back, and oh my god, the dogs snoring are just I don't know how they're that loud, because I don't hear them that loudly I don't even hear them at all in my microphone. Sometimes if they're really super loud and I'm listening, I'll hear it through. I don't know how the microphone picks it up that good. But anywho, beside the point, here is the 112th anniversary on a Sea of Glass is what the episode is called. And let's embiggen it.
As long as you can. Thank you.
All right. And we're picking up about 19 minutes into their show. And before we do, I guess now would be a good time to let you know who the people on the panel. We'll read through the video description. And again, make sure you go subscribe. Definitely subscribe to Part-Time Explorer and like this video and tell them that, you saw it on Legal Vices and you came over there. Talk me up a little bit. Right. This is the panel that he's got here. We don't want to get to here. It's already got 50,000 views. That's cool. This year, I'm pleased to invite Ted Fitch, J. Kent Layton, and Bill Wormstead, the historians and authors behind the book On a Sea of Glass, The Life and Loss of the RMS Titanic. Recreating Titanic and her sisters, a visual history, to team up with me yet again to commemorate in real time the anniversary of the Titanic disaster. We invite you to join us. This year, we're honored to be joined by special guests Ken Marshall, renowned artist and the foremost visual historian of the Titanic and her sisters. Don Lynch, Titanic historian and author, and advisor on the James Cameron film Titanic. George Bay, historian, I guess it's Behe, historian, author, and past vice president of the Titanic Historical Society. And Mark Chirnside, maritime and Olympic class liner historian and author. Joining us as well are Alex Muller, the digital artist behind the animations in several of my documentaries, and Levi Rourke, animator of the Titanic animation featured in this video and lead programmer for our upcoming virtual museum experience, Lusitania, the Greyhound's Wake. We have some exciting things in store. This sounds really cool. They showed little bits and pieces of it here. For those who join us, a brief update on the forthcoming HFX Studios Lusitania experience, the Greyhound's Wake, as well as our upcoming book with the history press titled Lusitania and illustrated biography. So anyway, this is what we're gonna be checking this out here tonight. So let's go back and re-embiggen and listen to our panel of experts. And I'm being educated by this as well. So we'll stop and talk about some things as the video progresses, because I'm learning a lot from these guys as well. Before we do that, Unhung Hero dropping a 20. We forgot to do our ship's bell. It's Maritime Monday. I'm out of practice. Where's our bell? Here we go. For those interested, if you're ever in Belfast, Northern Ireland, they built a museum next to the slip where Titanic and his sister ship were built. They're at the big, gigantic yellow crane shipyard there. You can walk the slip and see where it was launched. Highly recommended. And yeah, they also have the Nomadic, which was the ship that ferried passengers from the pier to the Titanic. And right down the street, if you're interested, go pick yourself up a watch from one of Ireland's leading luxury watch manufacturers, Nomadic. The name is not an accident. Nomadic watches. I have two of their watches. They're fantastic watches, and they're named after the Titanic's. The it's not a lighter. It's not a lighter vessel. It's anyway. The support vessel. My mind just went blank. It's named after the Nomadic, the vessel that takes people from the pier to the Titanic. All right, there we go. let's jump in. The tender ship. Oh God, thanks, Alex. Alex, my mind just went completely blank. It's the tender vessel. Me, maritime lawman. Me, no ship terms. Oh, yeah, I hate when that happens. But thank you so much, Alex Kane, for saving my bacon. All right, again, we're covering this here. Going to talk a little bit about it. They're going to set the scene, and then they're going to talk about some other stuff we're going to skip over, and then we will skip to right about 5 minutes before the iceberg incident.
All right, so right about now, let's start to set the scene just a tiny bit. We do have a couple of announcements that I want to get to before we get into the real moments leading up to the collision, but let's set the scene a bit. The night is April 14th, and I should note that it was a Sunday, April 14th, and tonight.
Oh, and when I say they do real-time review of the Titanic, I mean real time. Like the actual time that these events happened is when they broadcast. So they're broadcasting in the middle of the night at the actual times these things happen. And mentioning Ireland, where the Titanic was built, and at Cove, the very last port that the Titanic called at before sailing across the Atlantic to its doom. Both are in Ireland, and so we're celebrating. Just up the street from Cove is the not the Bushmills. The Bushmills distillery is way at the northern tip of Ireland. I should have had my Redbreast 12, which is bottled just up the street from Cove, Ireland, where the Titanic made its last stop. But we've just got Bushmills 10-year Irish whiskey here tonight, so cheers. That's what we'll be sipping on.
Is a Sunday, April 14th. So it's fallen on the same day. The temperature has been dropping. The passengers are winding down for the night and retiring to their cabins. And overall, Titanic is just beginning to go to sleep. So right around now, we have about 35 minutes until the collision. What are some of the things that are happening on board the ship in the 30 minutes prior to collision?
Well, things are definitely beginning to wind down for the evening. Titanic's clocks are an hour and 2 minutes ahead of us here on the East Coast. So right now it's 10:53, according to Titanic's clocks back in the day. And on cruise ships nowadays, we think of people staying up late and doing a lot of fun things at night, you know, whether it's casinos or entertainment shows or things like that. But Titanic was really a different breed of cat, as the saying goes. And most people back then, they tended to be more early risers than, you know, in many cases today. And so many of the public rooms would have closed at 11 or 11:30, depending on the space and the class. So really you have a ship that's beginning to settle in for the night. You have people getting comfortable in their staterooms and their cabins. They're saying their final goodbyes to their friends for the night and making their plans for the morning, maybe setting their watches for the time change that was going to happen overnight. You still do have some activity. We know that there were some people who at this point were still in the first class lounge. I believe there was a group that included, was it Dorothy Gibson who was there and who was with some others playing some, I believe it was bridge, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. And
I think that's an interesting thing to note, is how we've changed as a society and as a recreational society, even. Where this was back when people went to sleep at dark and they woke up at dawn or before to go about and do their daily stuff. But now it's like, woo, I'm on a cruise ship. Let's party all night. You got all the dancing halls and all the bars and all the buffets and things. And you had a different experience than the people that were there on that ship. And another thing that I wanted to mention before we go, I mean, this is a classic view of the Titanic, you know, with its four stacks. Only three of those stacks actually were functioning smokestacks. One was an intake vent. It was an intake vent, basically. But we think, when you think of the Titanic, we think of a big ship. I mean, its name is Titanic. It must be big. At the time, it was a very large ship. It was. Oh, and another interesting. It's the RMS Titanic. It's It's a Royal Mail ship, or back then it was called a Royal Mail steamer. So it had gotten dispensation from both the Crown of England and the United States to officially carry mail for both of the countries, and so its designation is a Royal Mail ship. It wasn't just a cruise ship. It was the Royal Mail ship. But it's not that big of a ship. It's actually very, very small by today's standards. And here's an example. Here's a comparison of the Titanic and just an average cruise ship today. Not even one of the huge mega cruise ships. This is a comparison with the Titanic today. It's there. You can see the Titanic was not that big by today's standards. So I mean, just kind of let that sink in a little bit there, so to speak. And it makes you wonder what would the people back in the Titanic days think if they saw some hulking monstrosity like this? Not to mention like one of these ginormous Disney cruise line ships and things. But yeah, that anyway, that's just a little comparison that I wanted to make for demonstrative purposes, so that you can see the difference between what was considered a large ship back then and what's considered to be an average cruise ship today. All right, let's get back to our show.
Right before this time, shortly,
hey Ozzy, what's up?
In third class general room, there had been an impromptu party with some musicians, including Eugene Daly was playing his pipes, and that's been portrayed in various ways in movies, but it was a little more raucous than what you might have seen in first class.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the first class smoking room was still open, so you still had gentlemen there having their highballs. Maybe
my entire house is a high class smoking hall. I should have had a highball. Too much of a bother. I'll just continue to sip my whiskey.
an after dinner cigar, playing some bridge with each other. There was a story, I'm sure that George or Don will probably be able to tell the story better than I can about that multilingual game of bridge that they were playing that Walter Lord wrote about, the delicacies of playing cards with people who didn't speak the same language. So still some activity for sure on the ship, but not as much as one might think nowadays from a 21st century perspective.
There were 3 card sharps in the first class smoking room who were trying to take Howard Case to the cleaners playing bridge whist.
Playing what? Bridge what?
Whist.
Bridge whist.
What's that?
WHIST. A type of bridge. I'm not a card player, but apparently it was a type of bridge back then.
Okay, interesting. All right. So there's a lot going on the ship with just settling in. It's I imagine whenever I see the ship sailing and the lights blazing like this, it just seems very cozy and it feels warm, like you're in a cabin on a cold night, but inside it's warm, and it's just that almost comforting feeling, that calm before the storm, which I know is trite, but that's really what these moments truly are. Anything else worth mentioning in these half-hour leading up moments?
See, I mean, that's the interesting thing. I mean, this ship has gone for days across the ocean with nothing really. I mean, just you wake up, you do your stuff on the ship, you have your dinner, you have your social gatherings, you have your games, you go to sleep, and you lather, rinse, repeat. You do it the next day. And there was nothing out of the ordinary. There was no there's really not much of a stage to set, but I like how they're talking about there's card sharps on the professional gamblers and on the ship there that's trying to take people's cash.
Before we jump off and talk about some of these announcements,
I know many of the people who were in their cabins settling in, they would have been reading. I know some of the couples they were still playing games in their rooms, things like that. I remember one couple, the name escapes me off the top of my head, but I remember that she was in bed and she was watching the dresses jiggle from the engine vibrations. It was causing a vibration, and she was watching them sway back and forth in her stateroom.
And there were some small bugs with the heating system on the ship, and obviously they were in cold weather at this point, but there were some sections of the ship where there's complaints about it being almost unbearably cold, and then some areas where there was too much heat coming in, and the passengers actually had to open up the portholes to let some of the cooler air in.
I seem to remember that was the second class cabins were the ones that were getting cold.
I mean, this is so cool. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but just listening to experts tell us what's happening minute by minute on the ship. Like there's the second class passengers, the heating's messed up. So you just imagine these people are going about their lives, not expecting what's going to happen in 30 minutes. They're doing the things that you and I would be doing. They're bitching about the heat. They're complaining it's too hot. There's others bitching about the cold, going it's too cold. It's just the sheer normalcy of it, that we have these people that know all of these details. This is why I don't talk about it myself, because I know none of this, and someone else has already done the research and it's incredible the amount of detail that people know about the Titanic.
It was second class.
Yeah,
second class was where it was really the worst.
Was it Ludi Parrish? I believe, who mentioned that specifically.
Yeah, that's what I'm remembering.
And Ludi Parrish and Eminita Shelley, who by seemed insufferable based on their own account of the disaster.
Yes.
They gave the stewards a run for their money on that trip. But even up in first class, I remember a number of the passengers' accounts, they referred to how they had to put their furs on as the afternoon progressed. I believe it was Lucy Duff Gordon, who said she had to retire to her cabin on A deck because it was just so cold. Go to bed, crank the heater, and crawl under the blankets and try and get warm. There were some passengers who were in the Cafe Parisien late, and they began to, the cold really began to hit them there, and so the group began to disperse. I think Edward Kent was in that group, and Helen Candy, and so it was the cold was really seeping in all over the ship, and there was definitely something not quite right with the technical heating and cooling.
We're going to be talking about the binoculars in a little bit. Yeah, it's a good point.
On board the ship during the maiden voyage, some discussion about that.
And very few, if any, passengers were up on deck at this point. They were all inside because it was too cold to go out.
And you can only imagine the lookouts up in the crow's nest with the wind blowing in their face and eyes. And that must have been very uncomfortable conditions to be up in that position.
That's right. All right, well, let's take a step back for a little bit. We have another about 25, 30 minutes until we have to start talking about the collision. We have a couple of announcements that we want to talk about in advance before.
Okay, now forgive me, part-time explorable. We're going to skip through most of this. This is, by the way, talking about their project they're working on, the Lusitania, the illustrated biography, and a virtual tour of the Lusitania. So we'll see how that's going. And then they also mentioned that there's 3 new photographs of the Titanic that had never been discovered that have just recently come to light. So we can just pause here. These are 3 pictures of the Titanic that have never been released, never been published, never been seen until very, very recently. So I think this is kind of cool. See, they're in the dock, and there's the cranes working around it, and then launching. So that just a little. Let's embiggen it here so you can see it in all of its glory if you want. They're a little bit bigger. So all right, that's with that done. Let's skip forward a little bit to about 5 minutes. That's when it was being constructed, I guess, because this was its maiden voyage. This was its first voyage. So that's all you've got. You've got pictures of it being built and pictures of it being launched. And that's it. Was the Titanic the first ship with 4 stacks? That is a good question. The Lusitania was launched well before the Titanic. Yeah, so it was at least the Lusitania. The Lusitania was launched in 1906, and it had 4 stacks. So it wasn't the first. Like the Lauretania had 4 stacks. The Britannic had 4 stacks, I believe, and the Olympic had 4 stacks. I don't know which one was launched first. All right, so now we're gonna skip ahead here to about 5 minutes before the collision.
And Quartermaster Hitchens.
Let's go back here.
Begins at 11:37 p.m. 3 minutes to go. So let's walk through the collision starting now because we're going to see it unfolding.
This is so cool to watch
down.
this. He's got the clock. They put the clock up there now, so we can see the time from the ship's time. Come on, go. Well, as soon as I push play, you'll see the clock up here in the upper left corner, showing the time. And I think this is just so cool. We get to walk through this real time.
So who is where on board? Which officers are on deck? Who is on the bridge? Who is in the crow's nest? And please let me know in the sorry, hang on. Please in the description if the levels for the sound effects are too high, let me know and I will lower them right down. Go ahead, Kent.
Right now in the crow's nest, we have lookouts Frederick Fleet and Lee also. They're together. On the bridge, we have First Officer Murdoch is the officer of the watch, and Quartermaster Hitchens is at the helm in the wheelhouse where we were earlier in the pre-show.
We have Fourth Officer Boxhole, who his story changed a little bit, but it appears that he was actually in his cabin at this point, getting a cup of tea, possibly not feeling well, but that came out when a later telling that that's where he was just prior to the collision. And
back on the stern, under the docking bridge, unlike what you're going to see in the video here, Quartermaster Rowe was keeping an eye out. It was being had maybe 40 minutes before the end of his watch.
And so now you've just heard the 3 gongs and the crow's nest bell.
And there's First Officer Murdoch looking to see what's ahead after hearing that warning.
Thank you. So that's it. The first warning they had was like 2 minutes before the collision. There was nothing out of the ordinary until 2 minutes. And we think, God, there's icebergs. And in my head, I always think it's got to be like somewhere up around the Arctic Circle. Maybe it was like way up in, somewhere around Greenland. But this accident happened just a few hundred miles southeast of Newfoundland, Canada. They were a day away from New York. They were almost there. So this wasn't up in some Arctic region. There was just this iceberg out there.
If you turn the sound back up a little bit, Tom, you'll be able to hear some of the exchanges.
They just gave the order hard to starboard. So they've seen something ahead. They've given the command to go hard to starboard, and you just heard them ringing the that ding 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 was them ringing the engine room to go hard starboard.
You'll be able to hear some of the exchanges. And it all plays out so quickly too.
Hard to starboard. The helm is hard over, sir.
Stopping.
Some of the research that we've done recently in preparation for the 4th edition really gives us a very good idea of exactly when the engine stopped during the collision. You're hearing them begin to slow now.
Just can you imagine being these few people that saw this thing just come out of the darkness? And now people are the estimate now is that the iceberg is about 110 feet high, which this is actually quite accurate. It came above the deck of the ship. That's why they found ice and things on the on the deck of the ship and stuff. That's where they
see the ship turning and looking as if it might miss.
From the iceberg, prevent further damage of the ship.
So this is an interesting thing here. The Titanic collides with an iceberg. The collision lasts less than 10 seconds, but causes damage in the forepeak tank, cargo holds 1 through 3, and boiler room number 6 and 5. Now, we've talked about this on other Maritime Monday shows where you have where ships are constructed so that you can lock off certain spaces. So if you get a hull breach in one area, you can lock that area out and isolate it so the water doesn't continue to flood into other areas of the ship. We talked about a few sinking ships like car ferries and things where the entire hold is open and you get a hole down at one end and it just floods the entire ship. Unfortunately, the Titanic wasn't built that way. The Titanic was not sealed off. It didn't have sealed compartments with the watertight doors. It had like little overflow areas. So one section would fill up and then it would spill over into the next section and spill over into the next section. And so you get all of the water filling the side of the ship where it is, which essentially is why the Titanic did that. Because all the water was pooling down at that side of the ship, and then she just does that. But yeah, so it ripped open a very, very, very long hole in the side of the ship, which does not help things at all either. So it damages the forepeak tank, cargo holds 1 through 3, and boiler rooms 6 and 5. And just how fast that happened. It's just, oh my God, hard to starboard, done.
From the iceberg, prevent further damage of the ship.
Frequently over the years, Murdoch's been heavily criticized for his decision to turn the ship, and yet really he nearly pulled off what would be the proverbial hat trick. He was so close to helping the ship completely avoid the iceberg. And with reversing the orders, in those critical moments, it prevented a lot of damage from being done to the stern of the ship, because a lot of people don't realize a ship is steered by the rudder at the stern. And so when you're going to point your bow to port, your stern is actually kicking out to starboard off of your center line.
You see, that's an interesting thing to note. I mean, now starboard is right and port is left. Now, if you want to turn your ship to starboard, if you wanted to turn left, you issue the command hard to port, because you're talking about the direction you want the ship to go. Back then, it was which way you wanted the rudder to point. So if you wanted to turn left, you actually turned the rudder to the right. So and there was a lot of people that were saying that was confusing, and which is anecdotally at least what led to the change in terminology. But yeah, it was back then. They were rudder commands, or turn the rudder hard to starboard, which a lot of people will ask, well, it's on the iceberg is on the right side of the ship. Why did they go hard to starboard? It's because they wanted the rudder to go to starboard. So the rudder points to, and I think he made a very, very interesting thing, which we can even tie it into the Baltimore incident. When you want a ship to turn left, it's not like a front wheel drive car where you're going and then you turn your front wheels and you drag the back end around with you. He made the very good point that the ship is essentially pivoting on its center line. So if you want the front of the ship to go to starboard, then you have to turn the rudder to port so that it pushes the water pushes against it, and it's not actually turning the front of the ship, it's pushing the back end of the ship, if that makes sense. So it's sort of like if you had rear wheel drive on your car, but it was the rear wheels that were turning. So yeah, you're not pulling it ahead and to the left. You're pushing the rear of the ship around, so it's pivoting. It's swiveling on its center point. I hope you found that. I've always found that interesting too. Somebody made a comment up here. I wanted to see. They could have saved the ship if they told all the passengers to move to the rear. That way, it would have balanced the ship. The people altogether weighed a fairly insignificant amount compared to the ship. I think there was a comment I was looking for here. Oh well, I've lost it. All right, scrolling back on down here. But we do have a couple of comments here that Janice Baldwin has become the newest member. Thank you, Janice Baldwin, for joining our little group here. The welcome to the Clean and Sober crew. We just did a members only stream from the campground yesterday. You can go check out the previous members only streams that are still up there. Jason J. Legal Vices, do you believe the Titanic 2 will ever be built? Oh, yeah, there was like some rich guy that was rebuilding as a passion project. Is that correct? That's what I seem to remember. I don't think it will be. They've been talking about that for forever and a day. And Chris Rowland, member for 4 months. Bacon, can I order bacon for my birthday instead of saving it? Make sure you all smash the like and switch over to live chat for all the comments. Exactly. Live chat is where it's at. Moving people around was an effective way to ballast and trim on U-boats, and America on the other subs, naturally a smaller vessel. Yeah, well, we've talked about that with some of our ferry boat accidents, like the paddle ferries and things, and the paddle steamers, where that's actually what caused the problem. That may have been part of the problem with the Eastland that sank in the Chicago River. Too many people on one side waving to people. Anyway, let's get back to our accident here.
You can see the stern of the ship moving away from the iceberg here. And we actually saw Quartermaster Rowe standing on top of the aft docking bridge. That is incorrect. He said he was under the docking bridge when that happened. He did say the iceberg.
And assessing the situation, Captain Smith leans out from the starboard bridge cab. The ship's engines reverse briefly, bringing the way off the ship. So they're trying to slow down there.
He was afraid it was going to hit the docking bridge when that happened. He did say the iceberg he was afraid it was going to hit the docking bridge. And it protruded from the side of the ship.
Yeah, and he thought it was a windjammer or a sail going past.
With its sails fully set going past, yeah. I would have thought with so much talk of icebergs that afternoon, that would have been the first thing on his mind.
Yeah, interesting that the captain first thought, the people first thought it was a sailing ship that had passed by. Nope.
It was a windjammer, he thought.
And you could see some passengers that had come out to see what had happened. And many of them caught a glimpse of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Rowe said the berg was about 20 feet higher than the boat deck, which makes sense because there were ice fragments around the forward lifeboats and also on A deck at the rear end of the ship. So ice had to have tumbled down from above to get there.
And there were some of the open portholes. The first class passengers actually reported that ice had come through those into their cabins.
There was some very interesting accounts from people on D deck, specifically on the starboard side, very close below the bridge, where we know the iceberg.
So this is like 5-6 minutes after the collision. After they first sighted it, the engines have already stopped. So it's been what 2.5, 3 minutes since the collision. The engines are completely stopped at this point.
Actually hit a porthole on D deck and shattered it and shoved some ice through it. They noticed it afterwards. It's a little bit of the iceberg damage that many people don't think about too much afterwards. So here we are. I mean, the engines have stopped. Captain Smith is now on the bridge assessing the situation. It's happening so quickly. And yet Titanic is already, no one knows it yet, but the ship is already going to the bottom.
And at this point, this ship is starting to list to starboard. not very long after the collision, Hitchens said he looked at I forget what it's,
The indicator?
the indicator, and it said it was listing 5 degrees to starboard very suddenly.
And the interesting thing is many passengers didn't even feel the collision. They were awakened or noticed something was wrong and startled them out of sleep when they stopped hearing the engines going.
Yeah, it's this amazing thing where you would think it was the iceberg and the collision, and yet the engines running had been an every moment part of their existence ever since.
See, and that's the thing. I don't know if it's kind of like, I mean, if you've never experienced it, like a really loud ship's engine for a very long period of time. I mean, normally if I'm investigating an accident or interviewing crew members or something, I'll spend about 8 or 10 hours on board. But it's still even noticeable then. Or it's like if you've been on a long airplane flight and you have that constant going through the airplane the entire 14, 15, 16 hours you're on. And then when you get to the gate and the engines wind down and it just goes really, really quiet. These are people that have been hearing nothing but that droning of the engines for days and days. And then suddenly everything just goes quiet. It's too, you hear that in the horror movies, it's quiet. It's too quiet. Yeah, that's what I guess what they're saying is what waking up the passengers is it was just too quiet on the ship. Captain Smith rings down on the engine order telegraphs for half ahead. So they're starting the engine. They're going to go half speed, not full speed, just half speed. Half ahead is like half speed.
Since they'd left Queenstown, those engines hadn't stopped. And when you're on a ship, you really begin to feel that rhythm, that kind of rumbling sound. And it lulls you to
get
sleep.
used to it. And then when it stops, it's, whoa, what happened?
Yeah. Now you're expecting them to stop when you're coming up to New York, late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, but for them to stop here on Sunday night with no notice.
In the middle of the ocean.
In the middle of the night, that was really what most people what got their attention. It wasn't the collision so much.
When, of course, it was a different matter for some down in steerage, particularly on the starboard side, where the collision was pretty substantial. And there's accounts of individuals being thrown out of their bunks, and then shortly thereafter, a small quantity of water in their cabin or out in the hallway, which obviously showed them it was pretty serious.
You can see that starboard list right there.
Mm-hmm. And viewers might have noticed a minute ago that we had the info card talking about Captain Smith ordering slow ahead for a few minutes after the ship had come to a stop. And there's a lot of speculation about why that is. And one of the possibly plausible explanations are that they were trying to get clear of the ice before coming to a complete stop, but nobody knows for sure.
We do know that when Quartermaster Oliver, I believe it was, came on the bridge, he said that he had not seen an engine reverse order given from the moment that he stepped onto the bridge, but he did agree in his testimony that the engines must have been reversed because the forward momentum of the ship had been checked so quickly. And so the iceberg must have been pretty close to the ship still. And so Captain Smith probably, very likely, that's what he was doing, is trying to give a little bit more distance away from the iceberg and bringing half ahead for just a little bit.
And it's only here in a minute because they had a full head of steam build up in the boilers feeding into the main pressure lines of the ship. And now with it stopped, it's not that the emergency valves on the funnels would have tripped and it started having that roaring of steam coming out at a extremely high pitch. It was compared to a freight train in some accounts. And really that's something that a lot of passengers noticed right away too, is that terrible din coming out of.
It happened very quickly too, because the pressure in the mains was so high. The ship.
We had a question. Where did it go? King Ginger said, how many survivors were there? There were 2,240 passengers on the Titanic, and 712 survived.
It was really running at pretty close to full speed, even though the 5 auxiliary boilers had not been fired up and connected to the system. So here she is running at full bore, and all of a sudden the engines stop. And here it's 11:46. You might see the title card here. The engines are running off for the last time. Now there is no outlet for all that steam that's building up.
Okay, so if you're in case you're wondering, the dark part of the ship, this is the direction the ship's heading. I know by the way the camera's panning around, it sort of looks like it's going to the left, but the ship is sailing to the right. That's why the smoke is going back towards the rear of the ship. So yeah, that's this long dark part. This is the bow of the ship, the front of the ship.
Tad says it's only going to be a very short time before that steam starts lifting the safety valves.
And that steam went on for quite some time. We think until a little bit after 1 o'clock in the morning. So substantial period of time.
I highly recommend you watch the Unsinkable Molly
Brown. These first few minutes after the collision, where the initial assessment is being made, you have all this foot traffic coming and going on the bridge. You have Boxhall leaving the bridge to go down below. You have the steam starting to blow off. I think we have the steam starting at 11:48. I know that we have a card for that specifically. You actually see it in the animation. But everything is happening very quickly. And I think that's one of the things that when we do these live streams, we're always surprised, because everyone thinks, oh, it took a long time. And yet when we're just chatting like this as a team, these minutes pass by very quickly.
This recreation is really well done. It gets better every year. This is really, really well done, top quality. And it was just happening. We think it went down fast. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes, I think it was, for the ship to sink before it was completely gone. So there was a lot of time.
Per year. One point I want to make is Quartermaster Rowe out on the stern claimed he did not know that there was anything wrong at this point. He saw the iceberg pass by, and he just stood out there waiting for his relief to show up, which wasn't for a while yet. But he claimed he didn't know anything was wrong. When he didn't know anything was wrong until about after 12 o'clock, when he saw, after 12:40, he saw a lifeboat in the water, and he went, why is that? And he called up the bridge, Boxhall entered, and said, get the rockets and bring them forward. Like my point being, Rowe thinks everything is fine at this point.
He's waiting for his relief to show up at 12:23.
And he had to have felt the ship tip to starboard. But he didn't say anything about that.
And I felt that was always strange that he didn't mention anything. He didn't think it was that unusual hearing this.
So I mean, that's we talked a little bit about that last week, where the guy that was in the stern of the ship who was back there. He didn't know for an hour that there'd been a collision. He was just doing his job. He was just back there waiting for someone to take over about a half hour from now, and then that person's late, and then suddenly he gets told to bring up the rockets. Can you imagine not even knowing for an hour that the ship is sinking because you're just back there doing your job? And the card here says, with the ship's engine stopped and her steam mains already operating at near maximum pressure before the collision, pressure in the system increases to the point where it begins lifting the safety valves. Steam begins venting loudly from the escape pipes on the ship's funnels.
The steam running out, which he couldn't have helped but here.
Well, yeah, he couldn't have helped. He didn't, as far as I can remember, he doesn't mention the steam blowing off at all. And he's out there all alone on the stern.
Well, he's out there all alone on the stern, and MG Law says, how did he not feel it? Well, we were saying a lot of people didn't feel the collision, but he would have heard the engine stop, or at least felt the engine stop. So that's a little bit odd, but also it was listing 5 to slightly more than 5 degrees to the right, to starboard at this point. So he should have felt that, but he's doing his job. That's his job. He's just supposed to sit Flux. He's just supposed to sit back there and do his job, I guess.
How could he not hear it?
Yeah.
When did we say that we thought the steam started?
It just started.
Yeah,
started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what time? And it's 11:48. Rowe was still back there for another 20 minutes, 20 plus minutes. He could not have not heard it.
And one of the early indications with the flooding, and I'm not talking about this sequentially, but You have flooding in the squash court. You have the postal clerks, the water coming into the mailroom and them hauling the bags of mail up the stairs. And there's a myth about them being overtaken by the water and drowned. And there's absolutely no evidence. And in fact, there's many reasons to believe that didn't happen because of they were.
If they had been trapped below deck, they would never have found any of the bodies.
Mhm.
And as I recall, two of the mailmen bodies were recovered after the fact. That's a 40% recovery rate, which is better than the entire ship. So I'm personally convinced they did not get trapped.
Mhm.
The water levels were rising, but they were rising comparatively slowly. It would have been,
They would have had time to get out without too much. And they're seeing the water coming up.
Yeah. Maybe this would be a good time to toss it to Mark Churnside, who is such an expert on a number of different factors regarding the Olympic class and the design of the ships, the watertight subdivision of the ships, how they compared to other liners of the day. It's so often
this is what we
said
were
that
just
Titanic
talking about.
was just a badly built ship, basically a ticking time bomb, just waiting to be sunk by something like this. But Mark, in a lot of his research, he's found so much information about the watertight subdivision and
We'll talk about that watertight subdivision here in just a bit, but this tag here, the card here says Saloon Steward James Johnston sees Thomas Andrews heading below, apparently on his way to inspect the damage. Andrews stops to reassure a number of nervous people on D deck near the grand staircase before continuing below.
how well these ships really stacked up to other ships of the time period. And also even about their lifeboat accommodations and how, the popular story is that the lifeboats were cut because they wanted the decks less cluttered for the passengers. And yet Mark has really turned up some incredible information on it. Maybe we should turn that over to Mark if he's here and he could speak on that for a few minutes.
I think that would be fantastic to hear about. You here, Mark?
Yeah, I'm still here. I think it's on the issue of watertight compartments. I think there's quite a bit of misunderstanding really about the standards of the time. So legally speaking, a ship was able to leave port if it was designed to float with only one watertight compartment flooded. There's a lot of comment about.
Again, there's a card that was just flashed up here for those of you that are not able to see your screen. Because the first officer Murdoch's hard a port maneuver, turning the ship's bow to starboard in the minutes after the collision, Titanic drifts to her final stopping point with her bow pointed roughly northwest true.
Lifeboat regulation and the fact that lifeboat regulation, could have been improved so much. But to my way of thinking, actually a bigger problem was that the standards for watertight compartment design were not higher from a legal perspective. So that was the law. A ship could simply have one compartment flooded. Really, that's not good enough as a standard. I mean, the chances are probably quite high that, if you're in a collision, Murphy's Law, you will be struck on a bulkhead, and so too will be flooded.
Okay, I have to make a correction going off of that last card that was put up. They were actually, it wasn't a rudder command. It was they were talking about they actually wanted the ship's bow to go towards the iceberg, which makes sense. That also makes sense because, like I said, remember it's the rear of the ship that is doing doing all of the real moving and doing the turning. So if you've got I gotta see how we gotta do this. All right, you're coming up on the starboard side. This is the iceberg. You're coming up on the starboard side. Why on earth would you want to turn your bow towards the iceberg? You would want to do that because what you're doing is you're essentially kicking out the back end of the ship. You're pushing the rear of the ship, so you would go around the iceberg, ideally, using the forward momentum and kicking out the stern of the ship. So, and that makes sense to what they were saying, that by doing that, they saved damage a lot of damage from happening to the stern of the ship. So yeah, I was wrapping my head around this hard to port, hard to starboard could be confusing, but I mean to us lay people, but probably not to those people, because as the terms have changed to where it was set the rudder to turn the ship the other way. But anyway, so that's what he was doing, is he ordered to turn the bow of the ship toward the iceberg, which would kick the rear end of the ship out and hopefully move it around the iceberg. Ballsy, daring maneuver, if I understood that correctly.
And
Tokyo drifting.
That was what was recognized as the highest standard of the time. So there was a government committee which was chaired by Sir Edward Harland from Harland and Wolff, of course, in the early 1890s. And the highest class that they recommended, so this wasn't a legal requirement, but it was referred to as a standard, was essentially a ship that could float with any 2 watertight compartments flooded. And that was the design specification that was basically the highest standard of the time. That was essentially the design spec for ships such as Lusitania and Mauritania. We know that ships built for
passengers and crew see Captain Smith heading below just shortly after Andrews is seen heading below. Yeah, and seeing this is the problem. If you can flood 2 compartments and stay afloat, you've got problems when the iceberg rips open 3 compartments or 3 cargo areas. Problems.
Other passenger lines, Holland America Line, for example, ships such as Rotterdam, were designed to float with only 2 compartments flooded, and the design criteria or specification for Olympic and Titanic was that they would float with any 2 compartments flooded. And J. Bruce Ismay said in his testimony, I think it was before the British inquiry, that they were very anxious indeed that they had a ship which could float with any 2 compartments flooded. And, you bear in mind how large some of those compartments were, such as the reciprocating engine room, the turbine engine room. That was quite significant damage. But going beyond that, what Harland and Wolff actually did was design these ships so that they could float in those circumstances with a considerable margin of safety.
From the bow of the ship towards the rear.
That was the design spec. They really over-engineered it so that I think in most scenarios there were maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, but basically they were 3 compartment ships. They could float, with 3 compartments flooded.
And third-class passengers have emerged onto the forward well deck and begin kicking around chunks of ice that fell from the iceberg. First-class passengers watch the fun. So nobody at this point, and where are we at here? We are at...
or even in a number of scenarios with 4
33
watertight compartments flooded. So that was...
so we're still... people are still playing games, and nobody's really aware of how bad the situation is.
Very much going beyond what was recognized as the highest standard of the time. And of course, the design had transverse watertight bulkheads. So that's bulkheads going from one side of the ship to the other. I don't think it's widely appreciated, but these bulkheads were of particularly strong construction. It was originally proposed when these ships were being designed that they would be put into dry dock on a single line of blocks. So that's a single line of blocks beneath the keel supporting these ships. Well, you know that they're more than 90 feet wide. So Edward Wilding from Harland and Wolff was well aware that if they did that, they needed to design, particular transverse strength, particular strength from side to side of the ship. And the transverse watertight bulkheads were one way of doing that. So they built them particularly strong, and they were considerably in excess of the standards of the time. Some of the requirements, I think, for Lloyd's Classification Society. These ships were not classed at Lloyd's, but they went far beyond that standard. And of course, the majority of these watertight bulkheads actually went up to D deck, which is something I think that is often overlooked. And contrary to popular belief, if you look at the earliest design concept that we have, this is the so-called Design D proposal, which was approved by the White Star Line, by Ismay and Sanderson in July 1908. If we compare that with the ship as completed, you see that they've actually added a watertight bulkhead. So there are some improvements there compared to the original design. Over the course of construction, getting that design finalized, the watertight compartment design was actually improved, which is contrary to what a number of people seem to think.
I think hindsight, with the modifications that were made to Olympic and Britannic after the Titanic disaster, so that those ships on paper could withstand.
God, this rendering is so cool because you can see the stacks venting steam from the engines, or the pressure is building up in the engines, and you have to let off the steam, otherwise it explodes. But they have the pressure valves that automatically release. So this is really, really accurate. It's really cool.
What Titanic endured on this night, it kind of, yes, it raises the bar for safety, and yet it kind of also gives the false impression that there was something wrong with Titanic from the word go. And really there wasn't. As Mark has pointed out brilliantly, Titanic.
Here's Captain Smith is seen going back up from his first inspection trip below. Back up onto the bridge, Quartermaster Oliver delivers a message from Chief Engineer Bell to Chief Officer Wild. He is told to find the boatswain and the boatswain. It's now pronounced boatswain. Find the boatswain and have him get the boats ready for lowering. So now they're being told, go find the boatswain and tell him to get the lifeboats ready.
It was built to a higher standard than anyone could possibly envision her needing to be to a standard of watertight compartments and safety. It was just that the scenario that she encountered, the way it all played out with that glancing blow along the side of the ship over about a third of her length, was something that nobody had really encountered, not to the best of my recollection at any rate. In at least recent history on the North Atlantic, it was very much the unusual scenario that you don't see coming, quite literally. And so because of that, it's very easy to say, Titanic should have been, a better built ship. And yet she really was a well-designed, well-built ship. A lot of thought went into her safety, far more than she is generally given credit for today.
It's just that the collision was worse than they imagined could happen. More compartments were open to the sea. It wasn't designed for that.
It kind of opened it up like
it was actually starting to go down. It wasn't designed to be tipped forward 15, 20 degrees. It wasn't built to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, they built it so it could handle very large waves, but this is far beyond that.
Yeah.
Viewers, a few minutes ago, you saw there was a message about Captain Smith concluding his first inspection tour below and then sending for the boatswain to start getting crew up on deck to uncover the lifeboats. So they don't even know that the ship is doomed at this point. They just know that the damage is serious. And that was one of the proactive steps that Captain Smith had taken, was to start having the boats uncovered and readied in the event that they would be needed. So Smith is criticized in a lot of ways, and in my mind, unfairly when it comes to some of his actions after the collision. And this is just one example of the things that he was doing actively to try to get things ready in the event they needed to evacuate. People forget that it wasn't something they knew instantly. They had to assess the damage and then figure out what they needed to do. And that took a little bit of time to figure out exactly what the situation was, even though clearly serious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clearly serious, especially because Captain Smith went below deck.
Mm-hmm.
That is not where you would expect to find him.
Yeah.
But he was that worried. he not only went down once, he went down twice.
Mhm.
Very serious situation. I mean, here we are, we're still 20 minutes from or so from Captain Smith being told that the ship is sinking by Andrews. And yet he is being proactive enough to say, let's get everything ready because we don't know where this is going. You know, you frequently think that the term the unsinkable ship, you know, everyone was so overconfident. And yet in the crisis, in the moment, Captain Smith was preparing for whatever lay ahead, and he knew things were serious. And in the end, those 20 minutes really ended up saving a lot of lives because if he
I hate to interrupt them, but they're going to keep talking until this goes away. Captain Smith orders that the boats be ready. There's the lifeboats be readied, and the crew called out. He departs the bridge again after Boxall informs him about flooding in the mailroom. Yep. Anytime you hear flooding in a ship, that's a bad thing. Boxall is sent to wake up the off-duty officers, Lightoller, Pittman, and Lowe. Lowe falls back to sleep. Oops. Sixth officer Moody begins preparing the aft boats and the port and on the port and starboard side. So he starts on the left side and the right side at the rear of the ship. He starts preparing those lifeboats.
He had waited those 20 minutes and said, well, you know, let's not worry the passengers. Let's, you know, not worry the crewmen. You know, at that point, they would have lost another 20 minutes in the evacuation. And who knows how many people who were saved would not have been saved in the event.
So, George, could you tell me a little bit about what inspections are being made right now, who is involved, and what are they finding?
Now, this is interesting because remember, this happened at the daylight savings time change. It happened on the night that they changed to summertime there. Because of the collision, Titanic's clocks are not set back in the two-stage adjustment planned for around midnight, totaling 47 minutes. Ship's time remains 2 hours and 2 minutes ahead of time in New York and 2 hours and 58 minutes behind time in England. Yeah, they didn't switch the clocks because of the accident.
Well, my research has continued. I came up with a sort of a preliminary thing a number of years ago, but I've continued researching, and my updated research actually will be out in about 4 days when the Triumvirate, my new book, is released. But anyway, apparently, shortly after the collision, Thomas Andrews appeared near the bridge. I don't have any evidence that he actually spoke to Captain Smith at that time.
Adriana dropping,
but he
Iggy
did
Pop
speak to a
lyrics
group of
on it.
passengers who were all clustered around there and asking him what had happened and stuff. And he reassured them, said, "There's nothing to worry about, but I'm going to go below decks and have a look around." And so he disappeared towards the stairway, I guess. And the passengers just hung around on the forward boat deck waiting for him to come back. Andrews was seen below decks heading down actually towards the aft end of the ship, but eventually he walked forward along E deck towards the mail room.
And we're going to skip ahead here about 15 minutes to where we get just before the point where the captain is told that the ship is going down. King Ginger says legal advice. The actor played Captain Smith passed away yesterday. Yeah, that was the very first thing we talked about at the beginning of the show. You played Theoden and played Captain Smith and many, many other roles. Bernard Hill. And we did have a question from Tam the Man. Could they not have used the iceberg to drop passengers and wait rescue? For two reasons they couldn't have. Three. One of them was the iceberg was way behind them, and it would take a good long time to circle back around. But plus, they couldn't have made it probably in time. It would just make the sinking problem worse. Two, they wouldn't have any way to get them off the ship onto the iceberg. And I mean, assuming that there was a flat place on the iceberg, but also the iceberg is too small. It wasn't a very big one. It was tall, wasn't really that big. Plus, there's a really scary as hell video somewhere on YouTube, if you look it up, where some people were being clever around an iceberg. And it was a big iceberg, and the iceberg starts to roll over on them. It's a pretty damn scary video. I think that just a very, very small number of people could roll an iceberg. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that would just be impractical for a number of reasons. Now let's skip ahead here to about, go to the 42 mark. 43 is good enough.
From Halifax near the graves. But then we have the crew at the Molly Brown house listening in, and I know also that the Titanic Society of Atlantic Canada, at least for the first part of our stream, was listening in at the actual cemetery, at the grave of the unknown child. So there's a lot of
Grave of the Unknown Child just sent chills down my spine and gave me goosebumps. What a horrific name for anything. That's sad. The Grave of the Unknown Child. Ugh. Now here's where legend starts to be made. The first strains of music from the ship's band are heard. They likely begin to play in the first class entrance on the boat deck at the top of the grand staircase, where there was a Steinway upright piano. So this is where we start getting the stories of the orchestra continuing to play, or the quartet or the band or whatever it was. They continued to play while the Titanic was sinking. And right now is when they hear the first strains of music.
There's a big presence for this live stream right now, and I think that's fantastic. So thank you for that super chat. Thank you for letting us know that you're here. It's great to have you with us. We're strolling along the boat deck right now. We're on the starboard side, and as we're moving along, we can actually hear the music starting to echo out. And I know George here has done extensive research into the band, what they played, and where throughout the sinking. So George, what is happening with the band right now?
Well, it's not exactly clear who summoned them, or if anyone summoned them to come up to the deck to play. I've seen it claimed that Captain Smith summoned them without any evidence. I've seen it claimed that Wallace Hartley decided on his own to come up and have the bandsmen play up there. I haven't seen any evidence for that. So I honestly don't know, but eventually they came up, and apparently they all gathered at the top of the grand staircase at the level of the boat deck, where, as a note that just appeared on the side of the screen here, there was a piano located there. So it was an ideal place, because that way all of the musicians could play their chosen instrument, including the piano player. And they started out playing cheerful music. A number of passengers overheard them playing Alexander's Ragtime Band. As the evening wore on, it appears that they sort of played, I don't know the proper word, more solemn music, I guess. One person heard the Star Spangled Banner, and a few other songs that weren't, cheerful, upbeat things. They were just, slower, more casual, or not casual, but just more solemn music.
I agree, George, because there were reports, not only of patriotic music, but you have to remember in Titanic's time, most of the people on the ship, they were very religious. Our society today is a little bit less religious, and many people on Titanic took comfort in religious music. And so there were reports, as you mentioned, there was some serious music, a little bit more somber perhaps, and also some religious music that was being played as well, according to these different reports.
Yes, that's true. There were a number of hymns, and my own research has led me to the belief that the overwhelming amount of evidence is that the hymn "Nearer, My God, to Thee" was played at the very end.
That's another goosebump inducing thing there, that like right there at the very end, when it's just like, all right, we're gone, and then the band starts playing "Nearer, My God, to Thee." That's ugh. What copyright problems? If you're talking about me, nope.
A lot of people say theoretically that
It wasn't Celine Dion, no.
the survivors mentioned the hymn Autumn and stuff. And basically, Harold Bride was the only person in 1912, pretty much, who mentioned the playing of the hymn Autumn at all. And the only place he ever mentioned that was in his New York Times interview. I have another interview, or it's the same interview with, it was in an Ohio newspaper, and it was the identical interview with Harold Bride, except in that interview, it said that he quoted the title "Nearer, My God, to Thee" instead of Autumn. So which one do you choose? Is his Autumn interview accurate, or was his "Nearer, My God, to Thee" interview accurate? There's a lot of uncertainty there. But just I've been doing an update to my band book on the band, Those Brave Fellows, and I've come up with a total of 70 survivor interviews with newspapers who mentioned hearing "Nearer, My God, to Thee," and there's only just one or two mentions of Autumn at all. So to me, the evidence is overwhelming that "Nearer, My God, to Thee" was played that night.
George, I just want to say I agree 100%. Your work on this has been truly groundbreaking in pulling together all these sources. But
now's a good time for a midstream grift. But isn't that cool? There's literally a guy on the panel who is the world's leading expert on the music being played by the band on the Titanic. I mean, this panel is so awesome, and I do strongly recommend that you go to Part-Time Explorer and watch this entire thing. It's almost 6 hours long, but just the amount of information that's being given during it's something you can just put on in the back. This is what, the second or third time through this. I think this is the first time really in depth looking at it. But yeah, just put it on in the background and listen to it and gain some cool information. Part-Time Explorer is a fantastic channel. Go there, subscribe to them if you haven't already done so. And hopefully we'll be able to get him on as a guest. And he mentioned a collab opportunity if it arises. That'd be awesome. But go to like the video and tell him that you were moved by the video as I showed it on my channel, and you just talk me up a little bit. And by the way, while you're here, hit like and subscribe for my video here for this live stream. We've got 272 people here. There is so much going on YouTube right now. Plus, it's Monday morning. You could be doing anything, anywhere, but you've chosen to be here with me. And again, as I always say, I do not take a single one of you viewers for granted. It just, whether it's 50 people watching or 2,000 people watching, the fact that anybody is choosing to watch or listen to me over any other thing they could possibly be doing it's very humbling, and thank you. We've got 272 people here, 316 likes. Continue to hit the like button, and one new member. Thank you, Janice Baldwin, for being our new member. And take our like and subscribe poll for what it's worth. It's really not that important. It's just a reminder to hit the like and subscribe. Clearly, we know what the favorite answer is. It says, just remember, nothing special. Just remember to hit the like button and be subscribed. 20% of you said okay, 22% of you said of course, 27% of you said yes sir, and 31% of you said this is lame, work harder on the polls, derp. So that's clearly in the lead. We'll do better on our next poll. Okay, that's really all we've got. And stay tuned for this week. We're going to continue to follow the Karen Reed trial. And the days that we don't cover that it's probably going to be Wednesday. We'll do more Laura Owens and the Tonsil twins case. There's more shenanigans going on there. And this Friday will be my May 2024 Grifty Boozathon 75,000 subscriber celebratory vacation fun drunken boozy griftathon panel. So keep that in mind this Friday, but this time it will be in the morning. It will be Friday a.m. Eastern time US. So bring all your coins in your grift and throw money at me for my vacation fund and for the 75,000 subscriber celebration, and just because it's F It Friday, where we say F it and we just have a panel of guests on and we chill and we talk. And also at some point, I do need, because my vacation will be 25th of May to the 8th of June. And before I go on vacation, I need to have a serious viewer appreciation stream. It'll probably be at the beginning or the end of one of my streams, but I've got some important things to say to you viewers that have supported me over the past 2 years, because today, May 6th marks the 2-year anniversary of my first live stream. My first video was on May 2nd, 2022, but my first live stream was 2 years ago today. So add that, it's the 75,000 subscriber 2-year anniversary vacation fun drunken boozathon coming up on Friday. But there are some serious things that I want to say to all of you viewers, and I want to do it right, because I have some things to talk about with you guys, because I really do appreciate you, and I want you all to know exactly how much I appreciate you and what you all mean to me. So I'll figure out a time, and then I'll announce it and make sure that as many people are there as possible. So thanks anyway. Just real quick, thanks for everything, guys. Let's get right back into this. We got about 35 minutes left, and we got some lifeboats coming here.
I saw somebody in the chat had mentioned about Song de Tom, and that's really a relatively modern speculation that when Bride said in that New York Times interview that the band played Autumn, that they meant Song de Tom because it was in the White Star playbook, so to speak. But nobody ever mentioned that. And as you said, there was a couple mentions of Autumn in one of those accounts specifying the hymn Autumn. So I think that's something that can be put to bed, even though it's been speculated about for so long. And I agree. Near to my God today shows up in so many, not just press accounts or something that could have been invented, but personal accounts and letters and over again. So I think you're 100% right.
I think
Thank you. I feel the same way. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that in addition to the 70 newspaper reports, it's either 10 or 11 primary sources, letters that pass.
Thomas Andrews is seen rushing up the grand staircase with a look of terror on his face. He is on his way to tell Captain Smith that the Titanic is sinking. The two men confer briefly, probably on or near the bridge. So this is where the activity starts to happen. This is where it starts to pick up. This is where the captain now knows, essentially, his ship is doomed.
Passengers wrote after the disaster, mentioning the hymn Nearer My God to Thee. And as Tad mentioned, nobody ever mentioned Song to Autumn. Nobody. That's it was apparently that tune was in one of the not hymn books, but the music pamphlets,
the playlist
that people could choose songs from.
The band,
but I've never seen actually any evidence that particular booklet was from 1912. It might have been from 1915. It might have been from 1909. Because I have a hymn book, or not a hymn book. I'm sorry, song book too. There's no date in it, but there's no mention of Song to Autumn. So there's no telling what the date of that particular song book was.
That's fascinating, George. And like viewers, just a minute ago, you had mentioned about Thomas Andrews. Like right at this moment in the sinking, Andrews had realized that too many compartments were flooding and that the ship was going to be sinking. So Captain Smith and he had separated shortly prior to this, with Smith knowing the ship was badly damaged and heading back up to the bridge. The lifeboats were being swung out, and then Andrews continued his inspection tour, found that horrific information, and rushed up on deck. So Captain Smith is about to issue the order here in a couple of minutes to start getting passengers into the lifeboats and to start sending the first distress call.
I want to actually touch on something real quick before we completely step away from the subject of the musicians. That's the perfect time to bring up something else. And I actually saw it coming up in the chat here. A few weeks ago, I put out a video about the Olympics piano. The one publicly known surviving piano from the RMS Olympic. And I did a documentary telling its story. where we explore how it had a twin that actually served aboard both the Olympic and eventually the Titanic, and probably went down with it. And you can find that video on my channel. I mention it because there is currently a fundraiser with a nonprofit association based out of Austria to acquire and preserve this piano and put it on public display. So if you want to check out that video and perhaps support that project, that would be fantastic. You can find it on my channel. It's like one of my most recent uploads, so you can check that out. Also, a real quick thing. I didn't mean for it to come off like this, but some people in the comments thought it was against private collectors because we had mentioned, Kent and I are in it, and we had mentioned that we want to make sure it stays in the public. There's nothing against private collectors. I think most of us in this chat right now are private collectors in our collection. It's just that we feel that this would be a good one to keep out in the public so people can enjoy. So anyway, go check that video out. It's the Olympic Steinway piano, and you can find it and perhaps learn about how to support it. Anyway, Andrews has just broken the news that the Titanic is indeed sinking. And Smith is about to give the order to put the passengers in the boats, send out the first distress calls. And actually right now, here it is up on screen. Smith.
Yeah, fresh from his meeting with Thomas Andrews, where he is informed that Titanic was in fact sinking. Captain Smith gives the order to begin loading the lifeboats.
Gives the order to begin loading up the lifeboats. So anyway.
What's really interesting about this moment too, Tom, is that, in so many of the movies, there's this confab or conference where all of the officers are gathered, they're mustered, the captain explains the situation to them and then, gives them their assignments, and they go off to their assignments in a very organized way. And that's really not the way it happened on the night of. It was a situation where you very much learned the information as it reached you wherever you were. Lightoller, of course, stayed in his cabin for a little while so that they could find him where they expected him to be. We know that Lowe had been, they tried to wake Lowe up, but he had fallen back to sleep. So it really, the officers were never gathered together en masse for an update or a conference to tell them, the ship is sinking, here are your assignments. The news reached them sometimes as they were on their way from one place to another, and then they finished that job, they finished that assignment, they went to a boat where they thought help was needed. It really was a bit more of a slop, not sloppy in a negative way, but it was just the information reached individuals on the fly kind of situation, much more than what you see in the movies.
I missed that message here. The first wireless message is transmitted by Titanic. It bears an incorrect location, apparently worked out by Captain Smith. It was roughly 20 miles west of their actual position. CQD, 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 MGY. MGY is the Titanic, and CDQ is what they used to do before SOS. That was SOS was later in the game, but it was CDQ in Morse code. It's one of the first distress signals that was adopted for radio use. We see this here in the Titanic. I just very, very quickly, because I don't know what the CD, I just know that's what it was. I've never actually thought, what is he? He adopted the convention using the station code CQ to all stations along the telegraph line, as the first wireless operators were taken from the already trained landline telegraphers. The current practice carried forward, and CQ had then been adopted in maritime radio telegraphy as general call to any ships or land station. The Marconi company added D, distress, to CQ. Okay, so it's like everybody pay attention. There's a distress call. The CQD was understood by wireless operators to mean all stations distress. Although used worldwide by Marconi operators, CQD was never adopted as an international standard, since it can easily be mistaken for a mere general call CQ when reception is poor. So yeah, then it was later. It later became the SOS, but back then I guess it was CQD.
It's just the information reached individuals on the fly kind of situation, much more than what you see in the movies.
So, Mark.
In defense of Officer Lowe and him not waking up, Lowe at one of the points in one of the inquiries says, "When we sleep, we die." They don't get a lot of sleep. When he's asleep, it becomes hard to come out of it. But yeah, he came to a little bit later when he heard feet on the boat deck outside his room.
So, Mark, Titanic has 20 lifeboats on board, 16 standard boats, 14, and then 2 emergency ones, and then 4 collapsibles. This is more than the requirements. Would you tell us a little bit about how?
Yeah, this is a thing. It had 20 boats, but that was more than I can't remember. I'm sure he's going to talk about it here. I think they were required to have like 16 or something like that, but it still wasn't enough to carry all the passengers. You literally get on the ship knowing there's not enough lifeboat space for everybody on board. Now the law has changed, due in large part to the Titanic, that we want to make sure there's lifeboat space for everybody on the ship. Isn't it odd that that would have to you would have to make that change?
Titanic ultimately ended up with this count of 20 boats, and what some of the previous ideas were, and just the thought process behind this count of lifeboats.
Yeah, sure. So, the starting point, essentially, the standard of the time and the legal requirement for passenger ships of this sort was really that starting point of 16 boats. It's a bit more complexity to that. They had to be of a certain cubic capacity and so on. But that was the starting point that they had. And that was basically what was done with other ships. So we know that Cunard's Lusitania and Mauritania were completed in 1907, and they had 16 lifeboats of similar capacity to the boats on Olympic and Titanic, and that fully met the regulations of the time. We even have a quote from the naval architect Leonard Pesquet, who led the design of these ships, and he also mentioned that the watertight subdivision of Lusitania and Mauritania was taken into account. The fact that these ships were safe, and therefore 16 lifeboats not only meets the legal requirements, but is more than they think would ever be required. And that's also what appeared in an early design spec for Cunard's Aquitania in November of 1910. And it was much the same for Olympic and Titanic. We have a design concept from July 1908, which I referred to earlier. And if we look at that, we see a total of 16 lifeboats, as you mentioned, Tom. So that's 14 kind of standard lifeboats, and then the 2 cutters. And if we do a straightforward comparison between that, between the completed ship, so this is both Olympic and Titanic, the number of boats was increased. So there was an order placed in May of 1911, and 4 additional collapsible, or I think I should probably say semi-collapsible boats were ordered from Scotland, from Glasgow, for Olympic, and then an order followed for 4 collapsible boats for Titanic as well. So that took the number of lifeboats up to 20, and that's what Titanic sailed with. That's what she was completed with. Now, at the same time as this was going on, they were refining the design. And if we compare the early design concept again to the ship as completed, the number of passengers and crew was reduced
more than the legal
quite
requirement.
significantly. And in particular, the number of third-class passengers that there would be accommodation for was reduced. So effectively, the lifeboat capacity, if we're talking about a proportion of the maximum number of passengers and crew that Titanic could carry, was increased from about 25% to about 35% of the maximum. And bearing in mind, of course, even the most popular liners of the period, on average, they were only sailing half full all year round. So, it'd be more typical that would represent about half the number of people on board. Now,
isn't that just the shit? Best case scenario, you've got lifeboats for 30 to 50% of the people on a ship.
There's quite a number of people who seem to be under the impression that Alexander Carlisle, who of course was one of the ship's key designers, resigned from Holland and Wolff because he'd had some kind of argument or dispute with Piri and Ismay about the number of lifeboats that these ships could have. Now, if people are really interested in this subject, there is a lecture I gave a couple of years back, and I go over the evidence kind of line by line, document by document. I spend about an hour on it, so some strong coffee is needed. But if they go to my website, markchurnside.com, there is a media page with various presentations, and they can view it all there. But the short version of it is that Carlisle recommended that they use a new type of davit, the Welin davits, and these were an improved design compared to earlier davits, and this was something that was noticed during Titanic's evacuation. I think it was Third Officer Pittman who said they noticed the Welin davits worked particularly well in swinging out the lifeboats and lowering them. And really what they were doing was kind of future-proofing, I guess you'd say, the design. They were aware that, regulation might change in future.
Skip ahead a little bit here. Skip ahead about 20 minutes.
Oh, that to me, that says volumes about the kind of person that he was.
Ismay at that point had to know what was going on.
And I'm gonna go back.
I don't know. I just
yes, it was my Norton antivirus said it was coming from Gahanna, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus.
It's just bizarre.
Yeah, they got someone attacking them.
I saw a minute ago that the corrected CQD position, the famous one, 41 degrees, 46 minutes north, 50 degrees, 14 minutes west, was just transmitted a minute ago. And it's being picked up by the Carpathia, but the Carpathia figures out where they are, and they think they're about 58 miles away from those coordinates. But this light on the horizon is just going off the edge of the screen there on the left. It looked so tantalizing. It looked like, this night has not been going very well for the officers and crew of the ship. And here they are. It looks like maybe something is going to break in their direction. And so Boxall is here at the telegraph key. He's trying to get their attention. And it's so frustrating, too, because he thinks he can see a reply. He thinks he sees a blinking coming from the other. And yet when he's looking at it, he's not able to translate it. It's more gibberish than anything else. And so this one thing that maybe they were hoping would cut their way in their favor, it ends up being a bust. And if it could go wrong that night, it did. And this is part of that sad attempt that was such a missed opportunity. So it's amazing to think about. Here it is that we're watching it in real time, these events playing out.
Morse light flashing. Now that
Here-
moved away.
Here we're also about to see boat number 7 leaving the deck.
Yeah, but boat number 7 is lowered away from the deck boat. It becomes the first lifeboat to leave Titanic.
E7 right in the middle of the screen, and just to the right of it is boat 5, which was lowered just after 7 goes down.
Yeah. So this is the first lifeboat to leave the ship. And again, it always strikes me, here it is exactly 1 hour from the collision. But this hour goes by so quickly. The collision, the inspections, Andrews rushing back and forth, Captain Smith rushing back and forth. And it moved so quickly to the first lifeboat getting away from the ship. It really is. They did heroic work that night, considering the situation that they were handed, to try to save as many people as they could.
And some of the, oh, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just need to interrupt for a second here. There's a chance this stream might end up cutting off. I'm getting notifications from YouTube that someone's trying to get into my account. It's
lame.
Is it echoing or something?
No, you're coming through just fine.
Yeah, we can hear you okay.
Okay, it's echoing for me.
Some dick would be trying to do that in the middle of this cool.
So you're getting notifications that someone's trying to break into your account while we're live?
Yeah, I'm hearing myself again. Hang on a second. Just keep talking for a second. Let me try to take control of this situation here.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully whoever's doing this is not going to disrupt this historic event. I mean, we're trying to commemorate an event that touched the lives of thousands of people. And yet this week, many of the members of our team have had our accounts either successfully hijacked on social media, or there were attempts that were made to hijack our accounts. And we don't know exactly who's behind it. I know we got the IP address of a couple of them, but I also know that we've been worried that our Tom.
Well, right now, I want to point out this angle right here is almost replicating one of Ken's paintings, one of our favorite ones.
Yeah, absolutely. This was our throw to you, Ken. I know earlier you said how discouraging it is for you sometimes, and that you feel like you're obsolete. And from the reaction from our audience, we want you to know that you are never obsolete.
Well, I don't want to make it sound as if, I'm just throwing down my paintbrushes and I'm never going to do another painting again, because what's the point? I just want to express such appreciation for this CGI, which is improving all the time. And, whereas a painting is a still shot, you can add the animation of the water and the reflections and the steam and people moving around the deck, which will only get more and more realistic as the years go on. And I look back to all of the work we did, on Cameron's movie, and you think the money that was spent, and to have
expensive book, but I remember
any of the work I did at the time, it was, the best that could be done. It was most of it was before CGI. And it was those paintings in Titanic and Illustrated History that directly inspired Jim Cameron to pitch his movie idea to the Fox executives. He brought that book in, he plopped it down on a table, and he opened it up to one of my paintings. I think it was a sinking scene, or maybe it was the staircase flooding scene. I don't know. And he just pointed to it. He put his finger down on it, and he said, "This is what I want to do. Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic."
And boat number 5 is lowered away, becoming the second lifeboat.
Yeah. And of course, so many of the people that are now Titanic enthusiasts, or even up and coming Titanic historians, their course for that was charted because their interest was piqued by the Cameron movie. So we have this direct line of
right.
Ken's artwork, your work, it went to Jim Cameron and his inspiration, which went to the studio executives, and clearly they saw some merit in it, and then it brought it home to a much larger audience.
All right, I feel my artwork really served a purpose in its time. I think we've maybe moved a little bit beyond now into CGI, but I could be wrong.
We hope so.
Yeah. There's always going to be a place for handmade artwork. Absolutely. I seem to have gotten regained control here. I have some messed up settings now, but it doesn't look like there was any real disruption to the stream. Yeah, as we were saying a few minutes ago, I think 5 of us on this stream already in the last few days have had our accounts compromised.
Do you want me to say it?
I don't know. I just
yes, it was my Norton antivirus said it was coming from God.
Let's move on.
I believe Bill was one of the early ones that noticed.
Here's the first distress rockets are fired by the 4th Officer Boxall from the starboard side near boat number 1. as it's loading. And that'd be kind of wild. You're trying to get into a lifeboat and they're shooting off rockets next to you.
Missed this, but we always talk about Quartermaster Rowe firing the rockets, but Boxhall in his testimony, do you want to talk about what he said? That
we know that Boxhall fired the first rocket while Rowe was still back out on the stern. I wonder if Rowe saw the lifeboat in the water by the reflection from that rocket. But Rowe called forward to the bridge. Boxhall picked up the phone, and Rowe said, well, there's a boat in the water. And Boxhall said, I had just finished firing the rocket. And at that point, Boxhall gave him some information about what was going on. You recall earlier in our call here, I mentioned that Rowe claims he didn't know anything was going on, but Boxhall told him, get a box of rockets and bring it forward to the bridge. By this point, who was the guy that was supposed to replace?
Quartermaster Brighton. He actually showed up late to relieve Rowe.
Yeah, he showed up late, but Bright was back there on the stern at that point, and they brought a box of rockets forward to the bridge, and from that point on, we're helping Boxhall fire rockets.
And this right here on the screen for just a couple of seconds there, you got to see Quartermaster Rowe's perspective on the stern docking bridge.
Mm-hmm.
What a bizarre moment that must have been for him. Everything's quiet back there. He hears the steam venting, he and Bright are talking a little bit, and then all of a sudden the rocket goes off, and by the light of the rocket, he can see this lifeboat off the side of the ship, and he has no idea what's happening. He might have been, I think Walter Lord surmised he might have been the last man on Titanic to know that something was.
Personally, I think Rowe knew more than he was saying. He's out there on the stern with Bright. He had to see people running around up on the deck. He had to hear people talking and actually doing things, and then he sees the rocket. I find it hard to believe he could have no idea what was going on until he saw the boat in the water.
Exactly. Just looking athwartship at the other end of the docking bridge, or if he was below the docking bridge, I don't remember. You would see the angle of the deck and the horizon out there. And, as dim as it was, you would notice that the slope of the deck was, something is really going on here.
Yes, exactly that, Ken.
And here in a few minutes, you see like the boat 7 and has already lowered to the water. Boat 5's on its way down. In a few minutes, you'll see boat 3 starting to go. So at this point, not a single boat has been lowered on the port side. This is a testament to First Officer Murdoch. And then when Fifth Officer Lowe, by this point, I believe, has come out on deck and waken up and is assisting. And something that really goes unnoticed in a lot of these accounts, everybody remembers the story about Bruce Ismay getting in the way of Fifth Officer Lowe, and Lowe chewing him out and telling him to basically swearing at him, telling him to get out of the way. But Ismay gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. He helps with boat 7, boat 5, boat 3. Then he gets out of the way. He's back at boat 16, helping a stewardess into a boat. Then he's on the aft starboard side, helping with some of those boats there. So he was very actively engaged in getting.
Real quick, notice how long it takes to lower one of these lifeboats. It's not like you see in the movies and things where it happens really, really quickly. It's a very, very long way down to the ocean, and very, very slowly, because you don't want to go fast, because you'll hit the ocean like a brick. But now we've got about 5 minutes left, so let's fast forward to the end. Can you imagine the hell of a view that would have been to see? Can you imagine being out there in the North Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the night watching this? That I can't imagine the horror that would be. And those people that aren't even in the lifeboats, they're just floating out there. That's when you know you're just intercourse.
And there she goes. We're sitting here in the grand staircase in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and we were watching the water level rise, and we were commenting, how weird it is that we're sitting in this room that's about to be inundated in the video. It really brings it home to us. It's always difficult to watch, but now that we can actually hear it in real time, it's
Yeah.
it really brings it home.
Well, we'll wrap this up again. That's just a few pieces. That's just a few pieces of this video. It's 5 hours and 46 minutes long over on Part-Time Explorer. I strongly urge you just to go and just listen to it. Just keep it on in the background and listen to the stories they're telling. Listen to the information that's being exchanged. And this is probably the last time we'll be talking about the Titanic. Like I said, didn't plan on talking about it once, but the world kind of came together serendipitously to make Maritime Monday on the exact day of the week, month, and day that the Titanic sank for the 112th anniversary. I had to do it, and I wanted to show this then, but I didn't get permission to show it in time. But I got the permission week and a half or so ago. So again, super special thanks to Part-Time Explorer for allowing me to use that video and to talk about it, because that panel of guests, they're the top of the top. They are the creme de la creme of the Titanic experts in the world that he had on his show. So what the hell am I going to add to that? It was an education for me as well. No idea what we'll do next week. I'll worry about that later. But let's see. Don't anybody leave right now. I'm seeing where we can send you. I know the Karen Reed trial is underway. So let's see who's covering it. That will be good for me to send to you. Good for me to send you to. That's what I was trying to say. Give me just a quick second here. Content. And then I'll say a few things, and then we'll wrap her up. Customization, redirect to, who do we got covering this? Weird. How come nobody's covering this? All right. If you want to go watch the Karen Reed trial, let me see. Is Potentially Criminal covering it? Nope. All right, then we'll send you over to Nick Starro. Let's go over to Nick Starro, shall we? Tell him hi if you want to watch the Young Thug trial. And I will do a brief review of day 5 of Karen Read tomorrow. But tomorrow we will be doing the Karen Read trial live because Tuesdays are supposed to be half days. So let's do that tomorrow. Tomorrow will be same time right here. Day 6 is day 6. It'll be day 6 of the Karen Read trial. Wednesday probably will be the Laura Owens tonsil twins. New shenanigans and new developments there. There's a lot to discuss. Thursday again will probably be, because they're doing the Karen Read thing. It seems like Tuesdays and Thursdays are half days. So we'll probably do the Karen Read trial again on Thursday, and then Friday will be F It Friday, the 75,000 subscriber 2-year anniversary vacation fun boozy griftathon. So stay tuned for that on Friday morning U.S. time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for yet another Maritime Monday. Once more, super special thanks to Part-Time Explorer. Go give him a subscribe, give him a like on this video, and tell him I sent you. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow for Karen Read. Take care. This is me, Lorax, saying bye-bye. Talk to you later. False alarm, people. Don't go anywhere just yet. Snuck in right under the radar. We have one last super chat from Jennifer with the £5. Just caught that at the corner of my eye. Maybe you could do a mini segment on free fall lifeboat sometimes. Ooh, we actually had a case where a lifeboat where they were doing lifeboat drills. And I mean, they're just doing it the way it was a free fall lifeboat drill. Lots of broken legs and backs and things. That was a bad case. Thank you so much for that £5 going out the door. That's it, people. Now we're going for reals. Just didn't want to shortchange Jennifer. Thank you so much. Goodbye for the second time.